Hello, I'm Dustin Ryan, and I'm a Microsoft BI consultant with Pragmatic Works and an all-around regular dude. I just wanted to take a few minutes to walk you through the new Power BI desktop application that Microsoft released this past week. It's pretty cool, and it does a lot of really neat things, and thought it'd be worthwhile sharing with you. So if you imagine that in some weird universe, Power Pivot, Power Query, and Power View had a baby, you'd end up with the Power BI desktop application. And the Power BI desktop application is Microsoft's new end-to-end analytics tool. So it allows you to um, connect to all kinds of really interesting data sources, traditional data sources, non-traditional data sources, um, load it up into a almost like a Power Pivot workbook, apply transformations to the data, and then build all kinds of really cool reports and dashboards on top of the data. And so if you are interested in doing this kind of thing, you can just go to powerbi.com. You'll end up on this website here. You can just go up to products, go to Power BI desktop. It will take you to the downloads page, and then all you have to do is click the download button here, and you'll be able to download the tool and play along for free. Now when you download it, you're initially just the free user like I am here. If you purchase the year-long subscription, it's $9.99 a month here on PowerBI.com's website, and you can see that there's some differences between the free version and the Power BI Pro version. Obviously, data capacity limit's one of them, and there's a few other things that I won't go through here, but I wanted to point that out to you here. And so let's get started. So I'm going to open up the Power BI desktop app here. Got it down here pinned to my taskbar. And so this just take a few moments to open up here. Oops, somebody's tweeting me. Okay, and so what you'll see when you open this up the very first time is the Power BI desktop welcome screen here. Got a lot of a lot of cool things here that you can watch if you want to watch some videos on building reports, querying concepts, uploading reports, all kinds of different things here. Got lots of helpful videos here, but you don't need that because you're watching this video, obviously. I'm just kidding. There's lots of really good material out there. You should go check it out. You can click the Get Data button here. This is going to be the first thing that you'll do in order to start connecting to data sources so we can load some data up into our model. So I'm going to click the Get Data button. And we'll see the Get Data screen here. And we've got all kinds of really neat data sources that we can connect to. So we've got Excel, CSV files, text files, SQL Server databases, Access, everybody's favorite database technology. Sybase, you can scrape data off web pages. Azure, if you've got a SQL Server databases up in Azure, you can connect to Azure Marketplace. Microsoft Exchange, Active Directory, QuickBooks. These are some new data sources that they just added in the most recent release. Salesforce, Google Analytics. So lots of really cool stuff out here. I don't have access to all those really cool data sources right at this moment, but I do have some data in a CSV file that I'm going to upload into here. So I'm going to select the CSV option, and I'm going to click Connect. Okay, and I'm just going to navigate to where I've got some CSV files that we're going to use. And I've downloaded some really interesting movie data here that I pulled up from this website called opusdata.com. You can sign up for a free trial account and download some really interesting data that has to do with movies and their performance in the box office and production amounts and all kinds of different things. It's really neat to look at in a dashboard, so I figured I'd download that so we could play around with it. But you can get that from opusdata.com. Pretty cool. So I've got my movie data CSV file here, so I'm going to select that and click Open. Okay, and so what it's doing actually right here is behind the scenes, it's connecting to this CSV file, and it's actually loading it up here into it's getting a preview of it here, and we're going to load it up into our data model. And behind the scenes, this is a version of the Power Pivot Analysis Services engine. So it's loading it up into our basically like a Power Pivot model behind the scenes. So I'm going to click the Load button here, and it's going to create a connection to the model and load up our data into the model, and it's completed here. So let me maximize this here. And so when you first load up your data, you're going to see this blank screen here, and there's three basic views that I want to point you towards. You've got the report view over here. Oops. Got the report view over here on the left. This is where we'll actually create our dashboards. We'll create the different types of charts we want to have in our dashboard. Then you've also got the data view. This is where you can kind of look at the data similar to how you could look at it in Power Pivot. And you could look at it in the table view. And then you've also got the relationship view here, where you can look at the relationships between the different objects that you have in your model. And so I'll just kind of show you what that looks like. If you go here to the data view, you can see kind of a preview of what the data looks like, which is pretty cool. Kind of looks like Power Pivot. And then you've also got the relationships view. So of course, not any relationships here to check out because we only have the one object in here. But if we did have more than one object, you would be able to see the relationships between those objects. But I'm going to go back over here to the data view of our model because I want to point out a few things here that you can do to model your tables here. So this is where you're going to do things like change column names, change data types, control sorting if you want to delete columns from the model or hide them from the report view. This is where you're going to be able to do all of that. This is also where you're going to come if you want to create a new calculated column like you could in Power Pivot, or if you want to create a new calculated measure. This is where you're going to come to do all of that. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to come in here and rename some of the columns in here. So this is the display name of the movies. So we want to make this as user-friendly as possible because everything, all the naming conventions here, all the data formats, all the data types, those are all going to be surfaced to the users once we start building our dashboards and everything. So we want this to be as friendly an experience as possible for our users. So I'm going to make sure that I set up all of the formatting here correctly, all of the naming conventions. I'm going to hide any columns that they shouldn't see. I'm going to delete any columns from the model that aren't necessary. And that's one best practice that I'll point out here. You want to delete columns from your model and not include them in the model if they're not necessary, because those are going to contribute to the size of the model. Those are going to take up more system resources during processing of the model and loading the model with data and interacting with it. So anything that's not absolutely necessary in the model, we want to make sure we remove those things. So things like, I don't know, let's see, something like SQL, right? Whether this is the SQL flag 1, if it was a SQL 0, if it was not a SQL. Running time, maybe my users don't really care about the running time of the film, so I would come in here and right-click on that field and delete it because we want to make sure that we don't include anything unnecessary in the model. Now this is my key column on the table. Not exactly a useful value for our users, so I would want to hide this from the user. So I'm going to right-click on this column and select Hide in Report View. So it's still a part of our model. We can still use this in calculations, in building relationships between this and other objects. So I'm going to hide this from our users because we still want it to be part of the table. And you can also see that after I've hidden it from the users, it's now grayed out, so indicating that this is hidden in the report view. All right, production budget. Maybe I'd come in here and rename this. We'll call this production budget amount. And I'm going to leave that column highlighted. We'll name this domestic. We've got our box office amount here, domestic box office amount. So I'm going to give that a friendly name here too, because we're all about having a good experience for our end users. So international box amount. Let's give our right names here, so that way it looks nice in our reports. I forgot to call that box office. And I won't go through and rename all of these here, but I did want to go through and rename some of the more important ones that we're going to use in our report, so that way it looks as nice as possible in the actual dashboards we're going to build here in a few minutes. Okay. One other thing that I'm going to do here as well is I'm going to select the formatting correctly. So these are all dollar amounts. So I'm just going to highlight the column, format this as a currency, so that way when we use our measures, our calculations and our measures in the reports, that they show up and they look nice and neat. We have the little dollar signs and the commas and things like that. So we want to make sure we set our formatting here correctly. And you'll notice here that every time I make a change, there's a little bit of a delay before you see the change show up, and that's because it's actually making the changes to the model on the fly for us as we're modeling here. All right. So that looks good. I don't think I want to do anything else here to the model. I'm not going to spend too much time doing this because if we did that, it would take too long. But I just wanted to kind of show you the gist of some of the changes here, some of the modifications here that you can make to the model. One other thing that I'll also point out here is you've got this field up here at the top called data category. This is where you can set categories for your field. So if I have like some kind of geographical data in here, like if latitude, longitude, or zip code data, or states or province, I could come in here and set this as the right category. So that way Power BI would know how to map that to our map report. So when we start building any types of maps, the data will show up correctly in the map. I did want to point that out to you as well. But I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so we've done a little bit of formatting here. And if I was building this model for a customer, I'd go through and make sure this was all formatted correctly, but I won't bore you with doing all of that. If I want to bring in some other data into our model, I can come up here to the Get Data button on the home ribbon and select the model that select the data source that I want to access. So I'm going to pull in some data from another CSV file here, and I've got some date data here that we're going to use as kind of our date dimension. So I'm going to select the date table and click Open. And in a few seconds here, it'll give me a little preview of what the data looks like. That looks good. So I'm going to click the Load button here. If I wanted to make some modifications here to this query, I could click this Edit button here. And this is where things will get very Power Query-like. So if you're familiar with Power Query, this is going to look really familiar to you. We can come in here and we can do things like remove columns, we can remove rows, we can apply different types of transformations. If we have a row that should be our header row, we can set that up here. We can merge queries together. We can apply all kinds of transformations here. I'm not going to go through all of this here, but this is where you can actually make modifications to your query. If you want to pivot or unpivot data, apply different types of date functions, all kinds of different things here. I don't really have any modifications here to make to our model, to this date table, except maybe I'll just go ahead and remove the month column here. Since our movie data is at the year level, I don't really need the month column in here, so I could just right click on here and select, where is it? Remove, yeah, I was looking for delete, and I can remove that column here. And once I've finished making all the different types of transformations to this query, I can just click the Close and Load button up here, and that will close the query editor here and it will reload that table. Now all of the different tables that are a part of our model, you'll see those over here on the right side in the field section. So this is our movie data table, and then I've also got the date table here. Okay, so I'm going to hide my date key here from the report view because it's not really useful for our users. And this is our year, so I'm going to rename this with a capital Y, keeping this user friendly. Okay, so we've got our two tables here. Now, if you import tables from like a database, if you import multiple tables at one time from a database, Power BI Desktop will try to create the relationships based on the names of the columns, the data types, things like that. But if it's not sure, it will automatically create those relationships for you. But if it doesn't at least have a high level of certainty that is the correct relationship, it won't create the relationship for you. So chances are you're probably going to have to create the relationships yourself. To do that, at this point you can't drag and drop and create the relationships that way. You're going to have to come up here to the Home ribbon and click on the Manage Relationships button. Okay, and you'll see that there's no relationships in here. I could click the Auto Detect button here and it will try to figure that out for me, or I could just click the New button here. Okay, now this is where we can create our relationship manually. So I'm going to select Date Table up here at the top, and all I have to do to create the relationship between these two tables is just select the columns that I want to use in the relationship. So for the date key here in the date table, I'm going to select date key, and in the movie data table, I'm going to select the production year date. And in the advanced options here, you can see that we have an option here for the cardinality Is this a many-to-one relationship, a one-to-one, a one-to-many? And you see it's correctly identified this as a one-to-many relationship. If I were to choose an incorrect cardinality option here, one-to-one, let me move this up a little bit. You'll see here that it's going to yell at me and tell you, hey, this isn't valid for this relationship because it's identified that this is actually a one-to-many, so it's going to tell you, hey, you can't do that. So I'm going to change this back to one-to-many. And you can have the option here for the cross-filtering direction. I want this to filter both ways, not just in one direction, so I'm going to select both here. And this is probably the option that you're going to use 90% of the time. So I'm going to click OK here. And there's our relationship here. So if I need to come back in here and edit it, I could do that too. But that looks good, so I'm going to click Close. And you'll see here that it's created the relationship for us. And we can also notice here that we've got these little indicators here indicating that this is a one-to-many type relationship here. So that looks good. If I wanted to make an edit to this relationship, I can double click on the relationship between the two tables here and it will open the edit button, so I can make a change here if I needed to. But it looks good, so I'm going to move on here. Okay, so we've looked at how we can import our data. We've looked at how we can model our data a little bit by hiding columns and renaming columns and deleting columns and formatting data types and all those different things that we can do there. We've looked at creating relationships between items. Now let's take a look at creating some calculations. Now, if I want to go to create calculations in my model, I'm going to go back to the data view here, and I'm going to navigate over to my movie data table here. I'm going to rename this table here first because it's just called date table, and that's kind of bugging me, so I'm just going to call it date. Now let's go back over here to the movie data table, and I want to create some new calculated measures. I'm going to write a little bit of DAX, and by no means am I a DAX master, so I'm going to try and struggle through this. And to create a new calculated measure, you just go over here to the modeling button, or the modeling ribbon, you just click the new measure button here. If you're familiar with Power Pivot, you'll recognize this as where you can create your calculated columns, calculated measures, things like that. So we can do the same thing here. So I want to create a new calculated measure that is called total box office sales. So I'm just going to type total box office sales. I'm use the equal sign here. And to come up with a total box office sales, I want to sum the domestic box office amount. And if you're new to DAX, you'll notice here that the IntelliSense is very good. It'll almost write the whole expression for you. Call this domestic box office amount plus the sum of the international box office amount, close parenthesis, and I'll hit enter here. Okay, you'll see here that I've got a new measure down here in the fields list here. Now I'll just point out a couple things here. You notice here that I've got these fields that have the sigma icon next to them, and I've also got these fields here that have the calculator icon here. Now the difference between these two is that this is an implicit measure. This is a field that the model, or that the Power BI app has determined is a number field, and it could be aggregated, and so that's why it's showing us a little sigma icon there. And we can use those in our reports, and we can specify in the reports whether we want to sum them, count them, do anything like that, min or max, average, whatever the case may be. These are implicit measures, and the user has the ability to control how they want to aggregate those. The measures down here, these are explicit measures. These are calculated measures where we're explicitly specifying how we want these to aggregate. So if you have a measure that you want to have control over how it aggregates, and instead of leaving it up to the users, you want to create an explicit measure like we've done here. And so that's kind of the difference between the two here. Okay, so I've got my total box office sales amount. Now let's create another calculated measure here. One other thing I'll do here is I want to control the formatting of this, so I'm going to highlight this measure here and click the dollar icon here to change this to format as a currency. Okay, so we want this to show up formatted nice and neat as a currency. Alright, I'm going to create a new measure here, and we're going to call this our previous year total box office sales. Okay, and so we want to calculate our total box office sales for the previous year, and I've got a date table, so I'll be able to use some of the powerful DAX date calculation functions. So we'll use our total box office sales amount, and to filter this for the previous year, I'm going to use the date add function. Okay, and my date key is actually date key from our date table, and I want to go back 1 year, and so the third argument in the date add function is the year, and so that looks about what we want. I think I got that right, and so I'll hit enter there, and we'll be able to test these in the report to make sure that we've got them correctly, and so we may have to come back and troubleshoot them, but I think that looks correct. If I had some kind of syntax error here, it would tell me. So if I had like an extra parenthesis, you'll see that I get the little red squiggly there. If I do something like that, it'll tell you. Or if I write a function that doesn't work, it'll give you a little warning and kind of tell you what the problem is. But I think I've got this right. So I got my previous year total box office sales amount, where I'm getting my total box office sales amount and filtering it using the date add function to get 1 year back from the current date key. Okay, so that looks good. And I'm going to format this correctly as well. And a couple other calculated measures I want to use. I'm going to create our total box office sales growth. So we'll calculate our growth, which is really just going to be our previous year sales. Actually, we'll do it's the total sales minus the previous year sales. Okay, minus the previous year sales stuff. So we can figure out what does our growth look like. Okay, so that looks good. We've got our total box office sales minus the previous year. And I'll hit enter there. And we want to format this, and I'm going to click away and highlight it again so I get access to the formatting here. And we're going to format this here as a currency. Okay, great. So we've created some calculated columns in here, or calculated measures rather. Okay, so I think now that we're ready to start the fun part, and that's where we're going to create our reports. So to start creating your dashboards and your reports, we're going to go back to the report view over here, which you can see right there. Going to go over here to the report view, and if you're familiar with Power View, this is going to be pretty intuitive. Although I think initially when I looked at it, I thought Power View was a little more intuitive, but maybe that's because I was more familiar with Power View and less familiar with this. Obviously, this is a new tool. I haven't played with it a whole lot, so I'm still kind of getting familiar with it, but it's still very, very easy to work with. So if I want to start creating reports, all I have to do is just select a field that I want to add to the report. So for instance, I'm going to use one of the new report types that we have in this release, the combo chart. So I'm going to click this here. And right now I don't have any fields that are a part of the chart, so that's why it's kind of all gray and ugly looking. But let's put the total box office sales amount here. Let me expand this a little bit so I can see everything. So we'll put total box office sales, so I'm just going to select that. And you can see that we've got a pretty little column chart here with the box office sales, total box office sales. And we could put the growth over here too, side by side. But of course, we don't have a year on here, so that we have no way to calculate the growth. So we need to add the year. So I'm going to go up to my date table. I'm going to get year, and we're going to put the dates here on the columns. Or I'm sorry, no, on the shared axis here. Okay, so now we can kind of see what our total box office sales for each year looks like, and we've got our total box office sales growth, our total box office sales growth amount here. Now, if I wanted to move my box office sales down onto the line values, I could do that. Could drop it down here and display that as a line. Pretty neat. Can do it that way if I want to. If I want to change chart types, maybe I decide, you know what, I don't really like the combo chart here. I just want to go to a straight regular bar chart, or column chart rather. You can click that, switch back over here to the clustered column chart. Or if you want to change it to the sideways bar chart, you can click that too and change it this way. So you've got some options there. So I'm going to get rid of let's go with the clustered bar chart here. So I'm going to get rid of my growth measure here. I'm going to add the previous year here, drop that right into here. You can do that if you want to. Let's get rid of that. Let's put the production budget amount there on the values too. So I can look at the production budget amount side by side with my total box office sales. Okay, so I'm just going to resize this a little bit. Alright, looking good. I'm going to move this over here to the right. Okay, format this a little bit. Now, one of the really cool things that you get with the latest version of the Power BI desktop app is you have the ability to apply all kinds of formatting to this. So you can control the colors, you can control the titles and background and all kinds of different things. So if I want to change any type of formatting with this chart, I'm going to make sure I've got the chart selected like I do here, and I'm going to click on the little paintbrush icon here. That's where we can control the formatting. So if I want to change the position of the legend, if I want to move it down to the bottom, I can do that. If I want to change anything about the y-axis, you can do that as well. X-axis. Data colors, this is the cool part where we can change the colors of on our chart. So maybe for total box office sales, I want to change this to this pink color here. Can do that, and then for our production budget, can change that here to the yellow color. Let's go with let's do the green. The green's pretty cool. So can do that. Well, maybe that's not such a good choice for our colorblind friends. So let's do the pink and the yellow, or the blue rather. You can also select a custom color. So if you decide you don't like any of that, maybe you want to go with the pink and the blue, or you want to pick like an orange color or green, or whatever you want to do. You can pick pretty much any color that you can think of there. Okay, so let's do the blue color that we had here earlier. So that looks good. Okay, now if I want to add another report or another chart to this dashboard here, all I have to do is just kind of click away from this chart, and let's add one of the new chart types. Let's add the funnel in here. So I'm going to click the funnel chart, and on here we want to look at our production budgets by genre. So I'm going to select production budget amount, then I'm going to click on budget. I'm sorry, genre. You see here it's building the chart for me. So not a lot of work required there to get it correct, to get the charts built. Just a couple of clicks. If I want to change the sorting of this, you can see right now it's sorted alphabetically by genre. Maybe I want to sort it by my production budget amount. I can click on the little ellipsis up here at the top right of the chart area and select the sort by option and select production budget amount. Okay, pretty cool. Alright, so I'm going to move this over here, kind of slide this around a little bit, format it a little bit, so that looks good. We can see our budget amounts by genre. So those adventure films, man, they're expensive. Alright, so we've got our funnel chart here, we've got our clustered bar chart here. Let's add another new chart type. Let's use the tree map. So the tree map is this guy here. It's basically, think of it as, it's sort of like a pie chart, kind of a souped up pie chart, but I think it's probably a little more useful than a pie chart because you can see the different areas a little differently, or a little better in my opinion. So on the tree map, let's put our total box office sales, and we want to look at it by genre as well. Okay, so we've got our total box office sales by genre down here on the bottom. We've got our production budget amount by genre, and then we've got our box office sales compared to the budget amounts at the year level. Okay, so that looks pretty cool. Now, one of the really neat things that you get here that you're familiar with this if you are used to Power View is you have the cross-filtering action. So if I want to filter all of our charts by genre, I can just come down here to the tree map and say, hey, let's look at what do our metrics look like for our drama movies, our dramatic movies, our action movies, adventure movies, whatever. So you've got this cross-filtering functionality built in here natively, so pretty cool. Alright, got a couple other things here that I want to add. Let's add a slicer in here for our movie types. So I'm going to click away from any of the other charts. I'm going to click the slicer visualization here to drop this on here. Let's shrink this down a little bit to fit into our report area. And I'm going to go to the date fields over here and select year. Okay, so we want to slice this by year. There we go, drop it in there. It wasn't letting me click on it for some reason. Okay, so we've got our slicer over here now. So now I can filter the whole report by year. So I could do something like that, add the different years in here. So pretty cool. Now we got a built-in slicer here. So dashboard is coming along nicely. I'm starting to dig it. Let's add a couple other things in here. Let's add a text box for our report type, or for our report title. We'll call this our movie dashboard. Let me click in here so I can type it. Movie dashboard. Can format our text a little bit. Bump up the size here. Give us a dramatic looking font here. There we go, looking good. And our movie dashboard almost complete here. Let's see, got a image I want to use here. There's our little movie reel icon. So let's shrink this down here to put in our dashboard. Let's move some things around here. Great. Okay, cool. So we've got this really awesome dashboard that we've built. Looks awesome. Now, if I wanted to develop other dashboards to be a part of this, or other reports to be a part of this dashboard set, I could click the little plus button here to add other pages here. Don't really have anything else to build at this point, so I'm going to click on this to rename it. Come on, let me double click it. There we go. And we'll call this our movie dashboard here. All right, looks great. I'm going to save this. There's our movie dashboard. Created another one earlier, so I'm just going to call this one movie dashboard 2. Okay, and so now we've created our first Power BI desktop report, and now we're ready to deploy this or publish this to our Power BI site. Now I'm going to click the Publish button here, and for you to be able to create or to publish the Power BI dashboards, you're going to need to sign into your Power BI account, which I have one. So I'm going to click the Sign In button here. I have one with Pragmatic Works. This is my work account. So I'm going to log in here to our Power BI site, and so we can publish this puppy. Okay, we are publishing now, and this will just take a few moments. All right, great success. All right, our Power BI desktop report is now deployed. So let's open this so we can view it on the Power BI site. This is the Pragmatic Works Power BI kind of sandbox here, so you can see that I've deployed a few of these movie dashboards out here. But now we actually have access to our Power BI report out here. So I can interact with it just like I did before. I can use my slicers, I can filter, I can do all kinds of really cool things out here in our report. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So we've looked at how we can use the Power BI desktop app to import data into our model, how we can model it a little bit, apply formatting, edit our query, and then we've looked at how we can create calculations and then use all of our model in a dashboard type report. I hope you found this little video beneficial. I hope you learned a little bit. And if you did, click the like button or share it with a friend. Or you can follow me on Twitter and send me a message on Twitter and tell me that you thought it was useful, or give me whatever feedback you've got. Appreciate any feedback from you guys, but you can follow me on Twitter at SQLDusty. And if you're interested in this type of thing and like to get other updates from me, you can also check me out on my blog, SQLDusty.com, where I blog about all kinds of things, Power BI, SSAS, and just basically anything Microsoft BI related. You can come check out here on SQLDusty.com. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you learned a little bit, and I'll talk to you later.